got the little, there we go.
Yeah.
Recording has started.
Excellent. Recording has started for the very first Not Another Mental Health podcast.
Hey.
I know, absolutely love it. Do you know, I've been prepping for weeks to say that. You know, I've been so looking forward to it. I would say that I've been looking in the mirror and practicing it, but you know, I'd never let that out on a recorded session. But yeah, this is the very first episode of Not Another Mental Health podcast, and myself and Becky thought, what better way to do it than actually to bring along the wonderful Ryan Mairs, who's going to help us kind of bring the subject of bipolar to life. So tomorrow is World Bipolar Day, and in the spirit of all things mental health and education and raising awareness, you know, there's a lot of generic information out there, but actually lived experience is priceless. You know, that's the stuff that you don't always get in the textbook. So it's a little bit different because we're doing it, I was going to say in front of a live studio audience, but well, I have said it, haven't I? So
it's a bit like that, isn't it? We've got people, real people.
Real people come along. So there's no editing out. This is what it is, you know. So Ryan, welcome along.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fun. We like different. This is interesting setup. So I'm definitely a little bit nervous, but you know, live. When you said no editing and how much I swear, I was like, oh, okay.
I thought the same. So
that's okay. We'll just do a spoiler. You know, we'll do a pre-warning that, you know, Ryan has said he will try not to swear. Now, it may be that I instigate some of that, and if that's the case, then massive apologies. But no, I think just to touch on what Ryan's just said there, you know, the aim of this is exactly that. It's not about polished. It's not about funky theme tunes. This is about real life conversation as it happens. There's no pre-prepared questions. There's no scripts that are running in the background. This is just a conversation like, you know, a few mates in a pub, a bar, cafe, canteen at work, whatever it be. Just instead of talking football or, you know, lipstick, nail varnish, all of that sort of funky stuff. But I had to go there, Becky. You know, we're going to talk real life stuff around mental health. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. So essentially, no plan, anything could happen.
Love it. Love it.
That's the slogan. That's on the t-shirts.
That's it. That is it. That's the tagline. So I think, you know, Ryan, I don't know, first up, you just want to kind of introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, that's probably going to be where I muck up first because I'm really bad at that. Yeah, so I'm my name's Ryan Mairs. I work in kind of talent and employer brand in my kind of professional life for Honest Burgers. And outside of work, I do lots of kind of stuff around mental health advocacy. So that's how I've met kind of Dave. So I've kind of been quite vocal about mental health battles for a few years. And I've kind of set up my own men's mental health network called Gents. Outside of that, I'm very kind of like into my music and sports. So again, it all kind of links to mental health, but yeah, it all kind of supports with that. So I love kind of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, martial arts, and then kind of music side of things. I like to DJ. So yeah,
Awesome.
Lots of hobbies. It keeps me busy.
I loved the post on your Instagram the other day of the flashback of, was it 9 years ago for your MMA debut?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I need to say this.
It looks as brutal as it sounds, Becky.
Yeah, it
Absolutely.
was. Yeah, it was. That feels like almost a lifetime ago now. But yeah, when I just turned 18, I had my first like semi-pro MMA fight and got absolutely battered in front of hundreds of people, including my own mum, which is great.
Oh my word.
But yeah, it was just really interesting to look back on, and I think I just used the post to kind of describe about taking your losses and learning from them and moving forward and having a bit of a laugh with it in a way. So
absolutely, really key. And you said about Gents that vent, and that's obviously where our paths first crossed. So
yes.
Tell us about Gents event.
Yeah, so Gents event was a thing that I kind of set up. It was a network that I set up. As I say, I've been kind of advocating for a few years now. And kind of during a depressed episode, I had basically I had a lot of friends that come to me to talk to me and seek comfort in me, which is great. It's what I always wanted. Excuse me, which is why I kind of started advocating. But there's times where I can't facilitate kind of offering that support. So I kind of have to focus on myself. And I kind of realized that I had a couple of different friends coming at me at the same time. And I was like, I feel really guilty because I've got to put myself first here. And I kind of just had the idea of just, why don't I just put all of us in a group chat? So there was about 3 or 4 of us, asked if they'd be interested. And then just like, I'm quite spontaneous, and like I was like, well, I'll ask more people, and then I'll set up an Instagram page, and then I'll put it on LinkedIn, and then it kind of just took off from there, really. So yeah, it kind of spiraled. It's how I met Dave. I think you found us through the Instagram page initially.
Wow.
Just from people sharing the stories and stuff, and then now there's over 50 of us from all over the UK, some of them all over the world, and it's just a WhatsApp group essentially. I didn't want it to be a bit like this. I didn't want it to be forced. I just want it to be when people need it, it's there. And as you see, as Dave sees as well from the chat, the chat can go quiet for a couple of days, and then suddenly, bang, someone who hasn't spoken in a couple of months will be like, I need help with this, or I need advice with this, or it's
really
nice.
Good.
And then people can offer the support. It really is,
yeah.
And people can offer the support as and when they want it as well, when they want to do it. I don't engage all the time. Like there's sometimes there's some scenarios where I don't really feel equipped to offer my advice or support. So, but then there's always some guys that have been through the same experience that can offer their help. So it kind of, it's quite regenerative.
That's
I
really
can't say the word.
Don't worry. So how did you sort of start down the path with your diagnosis? Because I'll be honest, I know absolutely nothing about bipolar at all. I don't even know how you'd go down the route of thinking, actually, I need to seek some help because I think something's not right here in that sort of scenario.
Yeah, so I've always had like depression and anxiety since I was like 13. And then I've got family history. So my mum is schizoaffective, but she kind of, the diagnosis changed often. So growing up, I always thought she was paranoid schizophrenic. And then at a later stage, she got re-diagnosed with like bipolar. And now it's like schizoaffective, I think. And then basically, with the depression, I kind of, over the last kind of 3 or 4 years, I just always felt that something wasn't right, or something. It was more than just depression and anxiety. So I had a big, I'd never been medicated before, and then essentially in lockdown 1, I just got a brand new job. I was like 3 weeks in, and then we went into lockdown. I was living with an ex. It was like the living situation was good, but like the work situation really stressed me out. I got quite bad anxiety, worse than I'd ever had before. So I had like chest pains, wake up in the middle of the night, physical shakes. I was like, okay, so I need to do something about this. Because I've been luckily quite vocal and not afraid to kind of call helplines or things like that. I called a GP and kind of got prescribed sertraline. And then I kind of went on to, which I know is quite common medication for people who kind of got depression and anxiety. And I have always been pretty bubbly at times and quite extroverted and sociable, but I also can be quite introverted and kind of on my own as well. But I felt like I kind of trialed it for like 6 to 8 weeks, maybe even less. And I just felt constantly flat, like emotionless. And I definitely don't recommend this. It was stupid of me. I just stopped taking them, and I didn't tell the GP, didn't tell them at all. And then so things got better out, like with lockdown, things changed, kind of improved the anxiety, but I always kept, no matter what. And I live quite a balanced lifestyle. I exercise. I do a lot of the right things. Still need to improve a lot of the other bad things, but I always ended up, no matter what I did, I'd always end up in periods of the year just like super depressed and low. and I could not figure out why, because my life is like, I love my life genuinely. So I was like, I just don't get it. I started to put like two and two together, like, why do I keep ending up back here? So I'd always rang my GP again, just like confused, just like, why do I keep ending up back here? I had like face-to-face meetings with her. I was like, stuff like this. And then I remember I got in touch with a GP I hadn't spoken to before, and they went through all my notes, and they were like, are you still on sertraline? And I was like, oh no, I stopped that like over a year ago, like months ago. And they were like, oh wow, like why didn't you tell us, like why did you do that? And I was like, I just didn't like that it killed my highs and my lows. And she was like, sorry, what? She was like, explain what you mean by highs and lows. And I was like, well, sometimes I feel like this, and then sometimes I feel like this. And then she was like, we basically deep dived, and I learned that like not everyone had the kind of same level of highs and lows as I was, like on a spectrum. And she was like, have you got family history of like bipolar or mental illness? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, I think we kind of should have like a bit more of a further chat. And then I kind of got moved to a chat with kind of an analysis or observation, where they kind of just asked me a few questions about how I react to things and kind of things like this. And the summary of that session was that, like, bipolar type 2, which was like scary, but also a massive relief, because I've been pushing quite hard to the mental health team that like just something feels right. And it was kind of annoying me that I kind of knew something was there, but I didn't know what it was. So it was a bit kind of long-winded way, but yeah.
How did you feel with that, Ryan? So when they said, have you got a history of this in the family, then what kind of goes through your head at that moment in time?
It was interesting. I think it kind of, in a weird way, it kind of helped me, because I think in a, not in an unfair way, but possibly like it almost fast tracked, because there was already the link and connection there for the mental health teams, probably. But yeah, I know my mum's mental illness is like really severe. Like I've had to section her twice myself, and kind of seen her being sectioned throughout my childhood. So like I knew it was severe. It's a severe illness, and I know that I didn't want to spiral into that kind of connection. I think that's what the mental health team were trying to prevent as well. So it was kind of very fortunate that it kind of got caught early on. And even since I kind of went public with the diagnosis on LinkedIn and stuff, I had a lot of kind of people reach out to me saying like that, like, fair play and like well done for pushing it at a young age, because they are now like in their late 40s, early 40s, and they're just getting diagnosed, and it's kind of like affected their whole life, and they've only just learned why they've done things a certain way, or learn about themselves like kind of in a pretty brutal way, like in some of the experiences I've had as well. So
how old were you, Ryan? Sorry, just out of curiosity, when you were diagnosed?
This was only a year and a half or so ago, last year. So I was 26, 25 at the time.
Yeah. Wow.
You make me feel very old saying that, by the way.
But though, there's a massive piece there, isn't there? Because if I think back to when I was 25, 26, and I wouldn't have, and perhaps it's because of the time or whatever, I don't think I'd have been able to face into it, handle it, speak as openly about it as you. What kind of makes you feel like you can, speak so openly about it?
Firstly, thank you. But I think because I started openly talking about my mental health from probably uni, and I was kind of quite public with it, and I think that just doing it like from quite a young age kind of helped and normalized it for me. But I've also got like quite stubborn, I guess. So I just, because I wanted to do it, I didn't kind of care. I did care about the stigma and like getting like judged, but I was just like, I'm just a bit stubborn, and I just wanted to front it and just prove people wrong.
Have you faced a lot of that sort of since coming out, that sounds wrong, discussing it and being open about it from such a young age? Have you found a lot of sort of stigma involved, or do you feel like you've been judged quite a bit, or have you found it people have been quite accepting of it?
I think it's been like crazily surprising how accepting it is of it and how much like respect you get. It's, I mean, yeah, it's especially like in places like the workplace or like just in general, like, yeah, people have been like so respectful from a young age, like, and people still mention it now, like when I first started doing it, and it's just like, and like now I've got like, you can't see them, but like I've got like 8 tattoos, and I'd say like 6 of them are mental health related, and most of them are visible.
Oh wow!
So like, they're like conversation starters. So like for me, that was a big one as well. Like as I've kind of over the last 3 or 4 years, like just trying to find different ways of being able to communicate it and just express it and just own it in a way. The bipolar one did scare me a bit because I think I found less commonality with people on it. Like I know a lot of people that are depressed and suffer from anxiety and other mental illnesses, but like I don't know really anyone my age or in my kind of circle that was like bipolar at the time. So I did struggle to kind of, especially with the new diagnosis and processing it, or it was a bit of a struggle. But I was fortunate enough to join like 2 group therapy kind of stages. So I did like, it's probably like 18 weeks of group therapy in total with kind of 2 different groups, all online, kind of mixed ages, but most were kind of within my demographic. And that really helped. Just learn, it was more like a bit like this, like I learned so much about bipolar from them, and I still don't know probably lots, but it is really interesting kind of looking back on things I've done, like in terms of behaviors or decisions, and actually learning that like that's probably the illness that's kind of steering that and not really my logic. Yeah.
Interesting. What sort of things, if you don't mind me asking? I'm really intrigued. I know you mentioned about the bipolar type 2, so I'm wanting to ask questions about that as well. But I'm holding some questions back. Sorry, I'm nosy. The rest of this little who know me well know I'm a bit of a nosy beggar. So apologies.
Sorry if I'm waffling too quick.
No, it's really good. Really interesting.
Thank you. So the first question was some of the decisions and stuff. Yeah. So
yes.
A lot of it is like it's like around spontaneous. It's very spontaneous, and like that really affects me. Like especially like I was basically last month or the last few weeks have been quite hypermanic, which is like the positive end of the scale. Like say positive, but
like the high
yeah,
side of the scale.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, the high side of the scale.
Okay.
So it's not quite bipolar type 1 where you're like manic, but like it's on the kind of scale. And yeah, this month in particular it's just been very like spontaneous, like, and the biggest effects are usually like financial. So just like being a bit reckless with money, and kind of not kind of making like some logical decisions. Things like yeah, like it can affect your sleep. Like obviously all of it can affect your sleep, decision making. I'm kind of still learning about it, but there's stuff around like hypersexuality, which is like really common in like relationships where like it can be hard for someone's partner. If you're in like a long-term relationship, it can be hard for a partner because sometimes people's libido, if they're on the high, is really high, and then obviously when you go depressed, your libido gets really low, and you're not. It's kind of, so it can be really confusing for someone's partner to think, is the problem me? So that, little things like that I've kind of learned over the last kind of year. But financial is kind of a big one. I even saw that in my own household with my mum's illness. But I really saw it firsthand, like in the last kind of few months. But again, I have a responsibility because I'm still not medicated.
Okay.
So yeah, kind of looking back and seeing some of those things and those decisions, and it makes you think, okay, this is where like the conversations for medication probably should be happening, or what could be the barrier and what could stop this. But yeah, it's super interesting.
It really is.
That's a really big point though, and I think going right back to the beginning around, you know, generic information, you know, text theories, side effects, you know, they're easy to look up, but where you've just talked about things like financial impact, I'm pretty sure that wouldn't necessarily be documented anywhere down in this is a potential, you know, side effect or a potential impact from, you know, bipolar. And I think that's, you know, that's astonishing, you know, to sit and kind of hear that, because I think, you know, it's really relevant in today's world, isn't it, where we're facing such a massive, you know, situation around cost of living. So I suppose how do you reflect back on that, and how do you kind of try to deal with that going forwards?
And do you know that that's happening at the time? You know, do you know that you're in that sort of like a manic up or a manic down?
So I'm kind of slowly getting better at it, understanding it. And then sometimes, like if I'm in a high and I feel like that, because your confidence is high as well, like you kind of super egotistical, not egotistical, but you just feel like, I'm going to try this, I'm going to do this, like no one can stop me, like and obviously bipolar type 1's a bit more extreme of that, but I'm starting to learn a bit more. Like I kind of knew as the high was dropping, I was like, I feel like I've been on those 8 weekends out in a row, non-stop texting all my friends and doing silly stuff. Like I kind of was like, yeah, it's probably because you were kind of like on a bit of a high. And as kind of Dave mentioned earlier, like for the first time properly, again, that made me kind of realize that I think I'm on a bit of a high. Was like a few months ago before kind of Christmas, I was on a bit of a low, and in January, and then recently I was on a high, and then it was starting to get noticed by people at work, and just like in my social life as well, where people are like, you seem like quite bubbly, and you seem like quite bullish, or you seem like quite like you seem like in a good mood, like you seem good, like people. The thing is, especially like say the nights out stuff, like it kind of gets blurred into culture, because it's just like, oh, he's 26, 27, he's just going out every weekend. But it's like most people my age can like put a cap on the energy, whereas yeah, like even at work and like even in like kind of normal social settings, I was a bit more bouncy and a bit more confident and a bit more back in myself, and just yeah, just you can notice it basically. And then excuse me, and then like in a few months time, or in 2 months time, there'll be times where I probably won't engage with many people, or I'll just keep myself to myself, or just be really disengaged and be a bit more low. And yeah, it is kind of flitting, but it must be so confusing for other people as well to see it, but it's just that education piece of like, I'm not just moody or grumpy, or like it is just like a change in tides as such, really.
Yeah. And do you find it quite cyclical as well? Do you know, like, is there sort of like not set time periods, but you know, is it sort of 2 to 3 months you're on this high and then 2 to 3 months you're on the low, or does it totally depend on sort of what else is happening in your life? Or
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So typically around like October, November, I guess it's like almost like the winter thing, I do notice usually that's when I'm most low, or I hit a low kind of phase. And I was actually really expecting that this year, but I think because I made myself hyper aware that like it might come, it actually didn't happen. It happened like 2 months later.
Right.
Because I guess I just lost track of it in my own mind.
Yeah.
But sorry, I forgot the other part of that question. Apologies.
So there, to be fair, so don't worry.
Ryan, let me go back to the bit where you mentioned about work, because you know, before we started, you know, we were saying about how this came about, I suppose, you know, when I reached out a few weeks back and asked if you'd be up for coming along. And coincidentally, you know, there was something on that exact day. It's like it was written in the stars, wasn't it?
Literally.
You know, so there was. So talk us through that.
Yeah, I was just having a kind of I'd had a, so it kind of links back to your other question actually, Becky, about like the kind of triggers. There we go. I'm back on track. Yeah, it's like you two were in sync there. It's like,
Hey.
Yeah,
it's like
so
we've planned it or something, which we haven't.
I was having a very good week, essentially, like a kind of successful week. And then the big kind of thing for triggering the highs and the lows is like different stimulations. So at that time, during the work week and just in my social life, I was getting a lot of positive stimulation. So I was getting like a lot of successes that were kind of boosting my internal confidence, as well as kind of a lot of kind of like compliments and kind of praise. So it was all kind of like reassurance, and it was kind of like adding to the high and the yeah, because obviously I'm already a bit confident from the hypomania. So it was just adding to that, and it was building up. But yeah, like I must have just been extra chatty. You know, I'm always kind of a bit of a joker anyway when I'm in that mood, so probably just dropping far too many inappropriate jokes and just kind of being a bit more cheeky, because I guess I feel like I can, when you're confident and have that confidence, you feel like you can get away with it or whatever, or just, you know,
Does it feel like you can take on the world?
A little bit, yeah. Like you're definitely not as extreme as like bipolar type one, where you kind of feel like a god or like invincible, but I definitely have that kind of cheeky confidence to be like, I could do that. Like it's just like a bit of an ego thing. Like you see someone do something, like I bet I could do that. Like I literally remember one of my kind of, lots of things happen when you're kind of in that confidence, or hypomania. But I remember I set up a bedroom business like 2 years ago in lockdown one, where I just woke up in the middle of the night one day, and I was like, one night, and I was like, right, what can I do mental health wise that can like bring good? And I just had all these ideas, and I was like, right, I'm gonna set up gender neutral self-care packages. And then that night I had like a prototype planned, and then like the next day I had all the orders from Amazon in, and then a week later I had 12 trial boxes, and then I had an Instagram page, and then I started designing a website, and then it just all kind of happens where you're like, I could do that. And then but the thing is, I learn is like it doesn't usually last. So like within like, I'll dip into it for like a month or 3 months, and like that'll be my main focus, and then I just like, I don't have the motivation or lose track of it, and then I come back into it, and then it come out, and then after a year I was like, why am I doing this? I did it again, like kind of thing. And it's kind of a bit, you beat yourself up because you're like, did it again. But at the time I didn't know I was bipolar.
So how do you cope with that from a work point of view then? So how do you deal with that day to day?
It is really tricky. I won't lie. I kind of like, I do quite well to try and protect myself, in terms of like because stress is probably the biggest trigger for any kind of episodes, as I'm sure a lot of people know. And when you're low, as I'm sure some people listening might know, is like trying to put on a face at work and get tasks done that you know need to be done when you just don't have the energy, you don't have the motivation, you don't have like the social energy in you either. It's brutal.
The mask.
Literally. And I know it happens so much in the workplace for so many different people. But you know, everyone's really understanding at work. I'm just as vocal at work about it as well.
I was just going to say, what, you know, from a workplace point of view, then what's the support like? How have work been? You know, how are your colleagues?
Yeah, they're great. You know, I think it's just as much as an education piece for them. I think it must be hard for a business as well to have someone quite vocal. I can imagine it's kind of a bit of a weird thing where, as more and more people start to do it, it's a bit like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, so I'm quite good at expressing my needs or my challenges, and then but the team and the kind of the seniors around me are very good at noticing it. So it's nice, and like even the little things like them noticing when I'm high or noticing when I'm a bit more disengaged. Like I think they're starting to learn that as well. Yeah. So it's a bit of a duo.
I bet when you come down from the high, because I'm trying to think, I'm obviously nothing. I've not got bipolar, but I struggle with sort of anxiety and a little bit of depression and things. And I find out sometimes, obviously I have low points and I have higher points. And sometimes when I've had sort of a high point and, as you say, full of energy and sort of full of confidence, and I'm, doing loads of exercise, and as a lot of people say to me, I'm volunteering in an empty room to do everything under the sun. I do find that when that starts to wane slightly, I'm absolutely exhausted. Do you sort of on the back of a high feel exhausted from everything you've done, sort of from that really high energy, high octane life? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's to be honest, like I no, I'm on the back end of a high. I don't even know if I'm kind of still in a high. I don't really know. It's hard to tell. But definitely feeling like the start of this year has been quite crazy, and being hypomanic with it, and then potentially like I'm almost like this. It's a bit of a brutal anxiety because I'm just like now I'm just waiting for the low. And I know there's neutral stages as well. It's not always high, low, high, low. There is like normality as well. Yeah, definitely. And that middle ground can usually last for a while as well, and things like that. Like the low doesn't always come. There's no like algorithm or patterns really. But definitely feel it.
Wow. So do you have things you can do in daily life? So if you can feel yourself slipping towards a low, do you have sort of coping techniques or mechanisms to help keep you out of that low for longer? Or is it you've just got to sort of ride the wave and wait to come out the other side? Or
yeah, no, it's a good question. I find just like, and it's ironically also tiring because it's a lot of not anxiety, but I try and keep myself as self-conscious as possible or self-aware as possible.
Self-aware, yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of I do quite a lot of like reflecting. So like I like to go on like, or not every day, but like often I like to spend like days. Sunday's usually like my day alone. Like I like to go for coffee walks on my own. I like to just like listen to music. I like to nap. I like to just recharge. But like even on those kind of moments alone, I just like to sit and think sometimes.
Yeah.
What's going on. I think because I've done it so often for so many years, weirdly, it's almost self-conditioned, thankfully now. So there's been times where I'll be, I don't know, it just kind of hits me where it's like, you've just been like, you're really low right now because of this, or you're doing this, or you need a bit of a cry now. So then I'm like, okay, cool, I'll just bang on some like Coldplay or something, have a cry, get it out.
Standard.
Yeah. And my body kind of is weird now, and like kind of, because I've had so many of those hard conversations with myself for so many years, it's kind of like it becomes a bit familiar at learning the patterns.
Brilliant.
But it's really hard to know those conversations.
That's fantastic, though, I would say, to be at your age so self-aware so that you know exactly what you need to do to sort of look after yourself. I mean, I'm nearly 40 and I'm only just getting the hang of that now. So I think, you're streets ahead in that respect, that you've already got that understanding of what you need to do to help yourself. Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Why do you think that is, Ryan? I've got a big thing about age. Whenever I talk to anyone, on any of these sort of sessions, I've almost got this thing, about age. And I know we've both spoken to the guys that do another podcast, Chaps Chat, who are lads in their mid-20s, and I just find it, amazing, I think, and I have so much awe because you guys are inspirational, whether you see that or not, you guys are an inspiration, because I am just over 40, and I've
just over 40.
just started being able to talk about my own experiences. So for you guys to do it in in a way that's so open, that's so honest, especially in a world of social media.
Yeah.
And anybody can be a keyboard warrior, can't they?
Mm-hmm.
I suppose, what do you think it is then? Why is it that that in your early mid-20s you can talk openly about mental health, whereas I feel like I'm only just getting there? Is it a generational thing, or do you think there's something else to it?
I think it is. I think it is partially generational for sure, because I feel like, well, I think one, I'm in a kind of backwards kind of way. It's a bit of a benefit to have had the background I've had with like losing my dad, my mum having kind of schizoaffective disorder, and like I say, the sectionings and kind of all that. And then also just growing up and like seeing kind of key figures in my life maybe not dealing with situations as they want to, and just kind of, you don't learn about it. And it's like, I don't know how you kind of, where that learning of that situation happens, but I've lost close family friends to like alcoholism and stuff as well. And how that's how they kind of dealt with their pain, and people deal with things in different ways. I don't know how that kind of educational piece happens, but I think just going through that kind of pain, you kind of don't want to carry it for yourself or seeing that for someone else. I remember sometimes I still don't know loads about my mum's kind of background or upbringing or kind of the finer details of that, but sometimes you do look at even people in the street that you kind of, most people, if you see someone kind of pottering around the street talking to themselves, mumbling themselves, dirty clothes, asking for drugs or money or whatever, a lot of people typically that you see will either be like, either take the mick or such and such. But actually, if you ask yourself the questions, and when you see these people, or like just general people, like why are they the way they are, like what have they been through, it's kind of teaching yourself that compassionate side of thing again. And I think everyone has it, and it's not always there. I'll be a hypocrite if I said I haven't made like inappropriate comments about myself or people, or that kind of situation growing up. But it's just asking yourself, why are people like that? I was always fascinated by my mum, and like, how did her illness start, or like stuff like that. So why does this person kind of turn to drink so much? And it's going through kind of your own little experiments and kind of asking yourself those questions, and it can be exhaustingly deep, but it definitely helps.
Absolutely. I think that's a really key point there, that you make about, let's label it as self-medicating. There's so many people, and I can certainly talk from personal experience that you go through this phase where your way of dealing with it is to base into it alone, in a corner, or even surrounded by a load of people on a night out in a bar, and whether that be whatever form of self-medication. Alcohol is a big one that people turn to, and it's certainly something that only as I've got older, I've started to kind of understand a little bit, I suppose. But is that something that you've kind of, I know you've seen it in terms of the experiences that you've just said about, but is that something that you've kind of looked at, to deal with certain things at certain moments in time?
Yeah,
And you
for
don't
sure.
have to answer that if you're not comfortable.
No, definitely not. I have, and I'd say still kind of learning about how I cope with things. Like, I recently did, through your support, as you, in November, I basically did my first ever like sober month, just to learn, like just to experiment. I knew I didn't want to completely cut out alcohol, but I wanted, especially with bipolar and learning that alcohol and bipolar aren't best friends. I just wanted to learn what life would be like without it, or like to see how I'd react without it. And yeah, I think I learned that it was probably much more of a coping mechanism than I thought it was, which kind of surprised me, and how much I kind of relied on it in some social situations. And then just I think exercise is a huge one for like helping. And I was lucky again, another key. It's a bit of a perfect storm, because I had a lot of that experience growing up with all the trauma, but also very fortunate that from a young age, from the MMA and the jiu-jitsu background, I was in quite a positive kind of self-reflective environment of martial arts, and it's very kind of it's a lot of humility and kind of determination and resilience, and like in that kind of environment from a young age, all through my teens to early adulthood, when you haven't got those kind of key figures and pillars around you, that definitely was a big kind of shaping as well. And I was exposed to lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds from a younger age. So yeah, I think that's definitely been a huge benefit. Whereas I think some people that are very used to their same small circle, who are all going through the same, you kind of don't know that you're all struggling because you're just used to that. Whereas it's kind of hard. It's kind of, yeah, it's very fortunate that I kind of had that, I guess, in a weird backwards kind of way.
No, and I think it's really interesting when you talk like that, in terms of, because weirdly I'd kind of forgotten about that, so what Ryan's referring to is a book called The Alcohol Experiment. So I started reading this book last year, and it's basically 30 chapters. Each day is a chapter, and it kind of helps you understand your relationship with alcohol a little bit, doesn't it? It's and for me, I didn't read it with a view similar to you of going, right, I'm never going to drink again or any of that sort of stuff. It was just, let me educate myself. And one of the very first things it gets you to do is list out what you like about drinking, and then what you don't like about drinking. And just from that initial list, I think on like day 1 or 2, you start to go, oh my word, these lists aren't like sitting in the way that I thought they would. And I think it's funny, isn't it, how, like you say, everyone's got their day-to-day circles, if you like, the people that, whether that's they've grown up with, connections at uni, whatever it be. But then 18 months ago, Ryan, we didn't know each other, and actually you've been able to impact my life positively, and without really knowing, I suppose, in a way, just sharing what I was doing with the alcohol experiment, and you then doing that, it just goes to show that just because maybe there's not certain people every day doesn't mean that your circle has to stay that small. There's a huge amount of influence out there in a positive way. So I suppose the long-winded way I'm coming around to saying it is, when you went through that phase of kind of self-reflection, no alcohol, just having that sober period of time and understanding relationship, how was your close circle? How did you find that? Because I know from my own experiences, that was the bit that I was most nervous about. Like my mates going, oh, come on, you'll be all right to have a drink, or come on, just come for one, and stuff like that, So how was that?
Yeah, it's it was really eye-opening. Again, I was similar to you, I was super nervous, and I know you saw me dipping into the chat every now and again, needing a bit of support, because I was close to caving a couple of times. But again, I was really surprised by like the level of respect people were giving me for giving it a go. And also it was really funny how many people, once I said that it's kind of that domino effect. Like you told me about your experiment, and I was like, oh, kind of, thank you. Like, I took influence, wanted to give it a go myself. And then when I was talking about it, other people were like, yeah, I really need to give that. I want to give that a go as well. Like, what would you recommend? And my housemate borrowed the book. Other people are asking about it. But yeah, the level of respect was like, but even the people so I've got a couple of friends who like, who are typically, really close friends, but a lot of our social time is around beers and like parties and kind of nights out. And even I think I was at a pub watching rugby, not with these friends, but I was at One of them's in the Gents event group, but I was out at the rugby watching, and I was like, I was around lots of drunk people. It was really loud. I was really stressed because I'm not drunk. My senses are kind of really heightened, and everyone else's aren't. So I was really tuned into the noise and the chaos, and like quite like stressed, overstimulated. And I was like, I kind of need a beer to get through this. And I kind of put on the group chat like, oh boys, I'm really struggling here. And I think two of my mates who I have a lot of kind of fun with, who I drink with a lot and we party a lot, they were the ones who were like, don't you dare cave. Because I was only like a week away from finishing the 30-day challenge, and they were like, don't you dare. And I thought they would be the ones who were like, well, you got this far, like, why don't you why don't you just treat yourself? Like,
you've done 3 weeks, it'll all be all right. But that's interesting in terms of your senses there, Ryan. So linking that then back into, day-to-day living with bipolar, does that have an impact? The fact that, in those sort of situations, your senses, your awareness of things, the way that you're feeling was heightened even more than, say, it would have been for me? Is it impacted in that way, or is it more a kind of longer term, it happens over a longer period of time?
I think it might be the longer period of time piece. Yeah, I think I've got my own kind of theories on the sensory stuff, because I started to also deep dive into like the potential of like if there was like a co-diagnosis of like ADHD or something alongside it. Because like it was like I almost had to like I do get it quite sometimes as well, where I get a bit stressed and flustered in like loud, noisy places when I'm like can't control it in a way. So that kind of, again, like, had me pondering. But yeah, I don't think the it would be like necessarily the bipolar piece. I think if I was low, like really low, which I think I kind of felt a bit actually without the alcohol, that's what made me kind of realize. Yeah, you kind of look for that stimulation, but yeah, it was
interesting, because I know on the alcohol side of things, I stopped drinking a few years ago now, probably about 4 years ago, because where I know obviously it's quite a common sort of coping mechanism to use alcohol to help, I actually found it did the complete opposite for me. So I would almost try and use it as probably a bit of coping, I had a terrible day, terrible week, give us a glass of wine. That always sent me in the wrong direction. It always made me worse. And it got to the point where I could pinpoint even just like a glass of wine to feeling low for like 3 or 4 days. So have you found, since doing that challenge, have you found that you approach alcohol differently now, do you think? Or is it just you've got a bit more of a respect for not using it as a crutch, as it were?
Yeah, no, that's awesome self-awareness as well, to when you from yourself, and knowing that it's say one glass and learning those habits.
That was enough.
Yeah, that's because, like, say, a lot of people don't clock that. They will just associate it to the work stress, not the way you're trying to cover it. But in honesty, I still drink quite a lot.
You're still young, to be fair. The hangovers won't have started kicking in yet.
Yeah, but I feel like I try and control the circumstances a bit better. So I don't, if I go into drinking alcohol already anxious, it's a disaster. And my 3 days after, like you say, a write-off. If I go into kind of drinking on a bit more of a positive, or I just want to see my friends, and then we just so happen to, the night gets a bit out of control and we have a few more beers and we stay out till 1 a.m. and we have a good time, then I'm typically not, it's not as bad. But if I'm using it to subconsciously cover something up, or I'm anxious going into the situation, then it's trouble. It's quite weird. I've definitely noticed that with like the hangovers, or just like the motivation the next day, or the anxiety. Yeah, we all know.
Absolutely. Even worse now, because you wake up in the morning and you go, I don't want to look to see if there's any videos being circulated on WhatsApp. And funnily enough, that's one of the reasons that made me do the alcohol experiment in August last year. But
we're
not talking about me tonight. We're not talking about me tonight. So
it does take
suppose,
that. It does take something like that. It does.
Yeah, absolutely. So bringing it right back round then. So tomorrow is World Bipolar Day. I think, like a lot of mental health and mental illnesses, there's a lot of kind of myths out there, in terms of what certain things are and what they aren't. Are there kind of some key myth busters that that you want to kind of put out there from a point of bipolar?
Yeah, so there's actually a really good page as well on Instagram that I can kind of read out some of their stuff as well, because I've been using, as I say, I've been using a lot of learning from other people online, but also just like shouldn't really do it from like learning from Instagram pages, because anyone can set up an Instagram page. But there's a really cool page called Bipolar Explained, and it's like kind of artsy graphics. But I guess just from the top of my head, there's like a really big, and it was one of my fears, is like when we say you're bipolar, people look at you like you're like crazy, or like you're gonna hurt, you're gonna hurt them, or you're like really unpredictable. And obviously it's almost like its own spectrum and scale. So, and everyone's different and kind of coping differently. But I'd say, yeah, we're not that kind of scary. We are just normal. What's another one that's kind of quite popular? That we're just moody, or like everyone experiences like being moody. And I hopefully, as I say earlier, it's like, yeah, we everyone experiences highs and lows, but there's definitely a bit of more of a kind of icing on the cake to those. Yeah,
the peaks are bigger and the troughs potentially.
They really are. Yeah, I can't find the other.
I think for me, there's always this thing of you go, oh, if you've got bipolar, it must mean that you've got two personalities.
Yes.
It's like your split personality. That's the thing that I've kind of seen in the past. When I had a colleague years ago that was going through a diagnosis for bipolar, and people had that assumption. Oh my word, it's what version of this person is going to turn up today, and it's like that education piece to really get people to understand what it is. And actually, like you said a minute ago, the fact that these highs and these lows stretch over a longer period of time, and you're living in this moment every day through that period of time. You're having to, and you can't just kind of go, oh, I'm going to hit the pause button on life, because everything else is still happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's the really key part, to recognize that the impact is not necessarily what you're always going to see. And like you say, I think the big one for me, because these conversations, certainly from my point of view, and I know me and Becky have spoken about this a lot, this is about educating us as much as the next person, because we only know what we know. And I think where we can start to expel some of these myths and really relate, I think, wow, the impact from a financial point of view that you said, right at the beginning, that's kind of stuck with me the whole way through, just thinking, wow, that it's not something that you would naturally associate.
No, it's really interesting. Like that mine's quite mild, and it's manageable now. Like because I'm kind of thankfully like aware of what I'm doing. But there was, if you think like if someone's on a high on a in hypomania or mania, and then they think they're super invincible, their confidence is high, why would they not bet $5,000 on something stupid and just, or buy something that they don't need? Like, yeah, there's nothing really in their brain to kind of stop them to do that. And it is scary. Like, I know even in my household, my mum and some of her impulses, like yeah, it can like, I feel for a lot of households out there and people. It puts probably a lot of stress on relationships, and yeah, I think it's definitely one of the more subtle things that people don't know aware of. So at least that's kind of something stuck today.
Absolutely, a lot has stuck, to be fair, and I can't believe that like the 5 minutes left bit just popped up on my screen a minute ago. You know, we were here before we started recording, saying, well, this could go one way or the other. And I think it's fair to say that we've probably scratched the surface. You know, I think there's a load more questions that I've got in my head, you know, about, you know, kind of like the process of diagnosis, how you go about talking to your mates about it, how you go about, you know, into new workplaces, all of that sort of stuff that I'd love to delve into even more. And I dare say, you know, that it would be great for us to, you know, kind of extend this conversation into another session. If you'd be up for that, Ryan.
Yeah, hell yeah, part 2.
Yeah, part 2. We like that. So honestly, I think, you know, from me, I just want to say a massive thanks, because you've taken a bit of a leap of faith here, Ryan. You know, we came up with this harebrained idea. We spoke a couple of times and then just went, right, let's do it, you know, and here we are, you know, and it really is raw. You know, it's a case of, right, this is, and I think you described it best, actually. I saw on one of your, I think it was either your LinkedIn or your Instagram posts, free flowing conversation. And that for me is exactly what it's about. Free flowing conversation where, wow, you know, we can just learn a whole load of stuff. And I think, you know, your ethos is probably similar to mine, and same with Becky, that, do you know what? If any of us can help one other person out there, then we've made a positive difference. And do you know what? I can absolutely guarantee that the fact of the things that you've shared today, they've made a massive difference on me. And, you know, we'll share this out, you know, for people to listen back on, because I think hearing lived experience is absolutely vital. So massive thanks to you, mate.
No, thank you both for having me. It's great to get involved so early on, and just glad to help. It's the bipolar conversations are new to me, so sorry if I waffled and rambled, but
Not at
it's
all.
great to keep breaking that stigma on something so specific and raise awareness on it. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being so open as well. And there's a few comments in the chat saying, you know, thank you for sharing your experience, because it really is helping to develop understanding in people. So fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Takes a lot to be open and honest, you know, it takes a massive amount. But slowly, you know, that's how we'll break it down. So, you know, we'll keep on keeping on. So, no, good stuff.
Hell yeah.
On that note, thank you very much, Ryan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Becky, we made it.
We did it. You guys.
On to number 2. No swearing. Although I think Ryan was close a couple of times.
You see bit my lip.
Yeah. Especially with the bit where we went going to take the mic.
Yeah.
So I had the bleeper ready. I
can't get you cancelled this early on. Jeez.
Oh, don't worry, it will happen. No, thank you very much, and thanks for giving up your Wednesday evening, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
No worries at all. It's a pleasure.
You know, when we send this out, we'll give a big shout out to the Gents Who Vent piece as well, because, you know, I can speak, you know, from personal, you know, experience. It's a massive, massive support. You know, sometimes going to set sessions can feel like you've got to share your soul, whereas actually there's days where, you know, if you're not feeling great, you can just put a message on. And guys from anywhere in the UK, Canada, blimey, we've got people traveling in Eastern Europe, you know, just randomly pop up with stuff. So, you know, the work that you do in there is phenomenal. Keep it going, mate.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Brill. Excellent. On that note, we will call it there. Thank you very much, and good evening.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy. Get your feet up.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
See you.